Ask you finally about Eminem. They've sent you a cease and desist through the music licensing company to stop using "Lose Yourself" on the trail. Have you agreed to move on?
Yeah, look, I think that I'll respect his wishes, but I would just say, will the real Slim Shady please stand up? Eminem in his rise used to be a guy who actually stood up to the establishment and said the things that the establishment didn't want him to say. I think the fact that my political viewpoints may differ from his, I think people change over the course of their lives. But I have hope for him that he will one day rediscover the renegade that made him great, and I'm rooting for that success in his life.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. We got to talk about an all-time beatdown of the mainstream liberal media by no other than Vivek Ramaswamy, who has been all over mainstream liberal media, beating down liberal hosts after liberal hosts after liberal hosts because they continue to lie and take his quotes out of context. And I'm actually going to prove to you guys in this video that that's what they're doing. They literally do it on every issue. Is very annoying because I have to make videos like this to basically push back against this silly nonsense. But anyways, Vivek, in this interview with Andrea Mitchell of MSNBC, they're going to talk about climate change. And climate change was a big topic at the GOP debate because Vivek Ramaswamy came out on stage and said that the climate change agenda is a hoax. Now, he didn't say that climate change was a hoax because, again, you have people accusing him of flip-flopping on this because in the past he said that climate change was real. So when he went on stage and said that the climate change agenda was a hoax, people try to say, well, he's flip-flopping as if he said that climate change was a hoax in the past, which he never said that, right? He never said that climate change is a hoax. He said the agenda is a hoax. The agenda, meaning the agenda from the government and also the world as well too, to fearmonger people about climate change, making them believe crazy things like, for example, that the world is going to end in 12 years and creating policy behind it, right? That's what he means, right? It should be clear and obvious what he means. But hey, you got to explain it to some people because I guess it's just over their head. But anyways, in this exchange with Andrea Mitchell, Vivek Ramaswamy is going to talk about what he said on stage, and he's going to proceed to nuke Andrea Mitchell into orbit as she tries to blame climate change as the cause for the hurricane that is approaching Florida. And Vivek literally, again, destroyed her after she tried to make that silly point. Take a look.
Talk about the hurricane that is now approaching. You've called climate change and that agenda a hoax. You said more people are dying from bad climate change policies than there are of actual climate change. But according to a UN agency, extreme weather events compounded by climate change caused the death of 2 million people between 1970 and 2021. Can you offer a shred of evidence that more than 2 million people died from converting to clean energy?
I can offer clear evidence that the number of climate disaster-related deaths is down by 98% over the last century. The number of people who died of hurricanes, tornadoes, heat waves, and other weather-related events in 1920, for every 100 that died then, 2 die today. And the reason why is more plentiful, abundant access to fossil fuels and technology powered by fossil fuels. I can also tell you today, it is a hard fact. None of these things are disputed. 8 times as many people die of cold temperatures than die of warm ones. The right answer to all temperature-related deaths is more plentiful, abundant access to fossil fuels. The Earth is covered by more green surface area today than it was half a century or a century ago because carbon dioxide is plant food. And carbon dioxide as a percentage of the atmosphere is still at a relative low through human history. Those are hard facts. And I think we have to acknowledge those facts when having this debate.
Well, there's a hard fact of the hurricane that is now approaching. The mayor of 3-generation St. Petersburg resident says he's never seen anything like this, the ocean warming. But let me move on to some
Andrea, may I respectfully offer a response to that? And I mean this with due respect. If someone on the other side were an uneducated person from Arkansas who didn't go to college and offered one weather event as an N of 1 anecdote to help support a theory of global climate change, you'd laugh off the stage as a rube for saying they don't follow data. The same shoe has to fit the other foot. Follow the actual data.
I'm not talking about one person's opinion. We talked to professors, academics.
You literally just quoted one person's opinion, with due respect. That's exactly what you just quoted. And I think that that's what's what's driving this kind of false narrative as opposed to the facts that I'm citing.
Well, and Dr. Michael Mann, whom we interview often, and other professionals in this field. But let's move on to some foreign policy.
This is why I love this guy. I absolutely love this guy, bruh. He is just destroying everybody. Okay, so he just listed out a bunch of facts to back up his statement that he made on stage. And Andrea Mitchell has nothing except, well, look at this hurricane, right? This hurricane approaching Florida is proof, right, that what you're saying is incorrect. And again, it's just so ignorant because this is what the left does, right? Every hurricane, every natural disaster event that happens to this country, okay, even though we've been having natural disaster events like hurricanes for as long as we've been able to document, it's all climate change, right? It has to all be climate change, right? That's what it is, okay? And again, it's so silly to make these type of statements, but this is what they're doing. They turn around and they take these disasters that happen, and then they blame the GOP as if the GOP is solely in charge of global temperatures, as if China is not contributing to the climate change more than anybody else, right? No other country on earth is contributing more than China, okay? It doesn't matter what so-called green energy policies are implemented in the U.S. if the GOP got on board, hypothetically. If we took our net emissions down to zero, we only make up 15% of the world. If we're not stopping China and India and these other countries, a lot of these countries having their own industrial revolutions right now, we are not making a dent in climate change, okay? It's not happening, right? But again, these people are brainwashed, right? They want you to think every hurricane, every natural disaster is climate change, right? The Maui, climate change, right? This hurricane, climate change, right? Tornado, climate change, right? And it's like, bruh, I mean, even the tornado science, right? If you read about how tornadoes are formed, they tell you that we don't know if climate change actually contributes to tornadoes being worse or not. We don't know. But they just point to everything. Oh, everything is climate change. It's all that, right? And again, it's funny how when Florida or the U.S. doesn't have a hurricane season that has a lot of hurricanes, when there are fewer hurricanes than usual, these same people are silent, right? They don't seem to blame climate change for the fact that we have fewer hurricanes than usual in a season, right? Or it's only when there's more hurricanes or there's a hurricane they're out here talking about climate change. It's hilarious how that works, okay? But again, you know, I just love the way that he set her straight for essentially trying to point to one hurricane as an example to try to prove the global theory of climate change. It was a ridiculous statement, but she doesn't really know anything about what she's talking about. She's just reading from a script. That's why she said that, because she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know, right? She just reading from her script. This is what she's told to say. Anyways, so on to the foreign policy part of the interview, okay, that I want to talk about. And the reason why I really want to talk about this one is because I keep trying to tell you guys, the attacks against Vivek are so disgusting. They do the same thing to him they did to Trump, in the sense that when you actually are talking about policy, okay, it's not one of those things where in a couple sentences you can actually understand somebody's position. But what they do is that they take a couple sentences that Vivek Ramaswamy says, they take them out of context, right, of a much broader contextual conversation, and they extrapolate it to some extreme position that he's not actually really taking. And that is exactly what Nikki Haley, the neocons, Fox News, and the mainstream liberal media are all doing with Vivek Ramaswamy's position on Israel. I actually want to play a clip that was 3 weeks ago, it was before the debate, of Vivek Ramaswamy talking about his position on Israel, aid to Israel, and you guys tell me whether or not it sounds like he's trying to abandon Israel, as Nimrata, aka Nikki Haley, says. Take a look.
Is Abraham Accords 2.0. Let's get Saudi Arabia, let's get Oman, Qatar, Indonesia in there. This propels Israel forward. And so then we might get to a place where by 2028, when our current $30 billion commitment, $38 billion commitment, which I absolutely stand by and view as sacrosanct, we may be in a place where if we've really succeeded with Abraham Accords 2.0, we've long graduated from the needs of the past where the necessity of that support had to be what it was. And so that's really what I mean. When I say support Israel, I support Israel because it's in the American interest. And from Israel's perspective, that's a much stronger commitment than somebody that just happens to have a preference versus a nation that says, no, this is in our interest, actually, to make sure that we're getting the intelligence that we're getting. Many of those weapons that we've sent to Ukraine have ended up in the wrong hands. How do we know? It's actually because of Israeli intelligence. I think a lot of the technology transfer from the Iron Dome, I mean, this has been useful for missile defense in the United States. So when I say it's in our self-interest, I actually think that's actually also the strongest basis that's in Israel's self-interest, too. And that gets to a broader vision of my foreign policy. I am a George Washington, America First conservative.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. He views the $38 billion that we give to Israel every year as sacrosanct, which, in my opinion, that doesn't sound like he wants to abandon Israel. He then goes on to say, however, me personally, I think it's in Israel's best interest and America's best interest if by 2028 we get Israel to the point militarily, it sounds like, because he's mainly referencing potential military partners in the region. If we get them to the point where they can essentially all kind of join together in some type of military alliance, that's what it sounds like, they won't need our support. He didn't at any one point claim that we're not going to give them support or that we're going to take away support. He says, yeah, the goal is to get them to the point where they don't need it. And I'm thinking mostly militarily, because then he goes on and he says, well, there's a lot of things that we do get from Israel in regards to intelligence. So if we're going to have this type of relationship with them, then it shouldn't be one-sided in the sense that we're giving a lot more money to them than what we're getting out of it. It should be an equal partnership, right? They should be able to stand on their own 2 feet, okay? Which to me sounds great. It sounds great for Israel and the United States. If they don't need us, they can stand on their own 2 feet and we can have a mutual relationship where we're both mutually benefiting, right? But again, because that's outside of the GOP orthodoxy of basically never asking any questions about the aid that we give to Israel and why we're doing it and how much does it benefit us, they want to smear him and say, well, he's trying to abandon Israel, right? Again, just flat out lie. They just flat out lie. And this is what I'm talking about, guys. I'm telling you, 99% of the smears against this guy are lies. They're either lies or they're out of context. Trust me, I've looked into it. I'm telling you, nobody knows more about this than me. Okay, but anyways, that brings me to this video in which Andrea Michelle is going to confront Vivek on some of his foreign policy stuff, and I want to talk about it because the Israel thing is included in it as well too. So let's get into it.
In terms of China, you've also talked about staying as a force, a deterrent force in the Taiwan Strait, putting more military in until you said we would be independent on superconductors in 2028. And at that point, we should pull out and Taiwan would be on its own. Let me play for you what Nikki Haley has said about what you've said about our allies.
That's not what I've said, but you can play Nikki Haley's lies.
You said that we should send destroyers through the Taiwan Strait once a week, keep ramping up naval deployments in the South China Sea to essentially deter China from trying to take over Taiwan until we have achieved semiconductor independence by the end of your first term in 2028.
At which point,
it would no longer be in our self-interest to
resume.
stop China. Is that the way the U.S. under
That's not what I
President
said.
Ramaswamy would treat allies?
I will give you word for word what I said, at which point we will resume our position of strategic ambiguity, which, Andrea, I will remind you, is our position towards Taiwan today. The U.S., neither party even recognizes Taiwan as a nation right now. Both parties embrace the one China policy as we speak.
With the position
that's a good thing, because then you would know that what I've said.
But that position does not deal with the
I'm the only presidential candidate, Andrea. I'm the only presidential candidate who has said we will defend Taiwan. Nobody's had the courage to say it. And then I've said after we achieve semiconductor independence, we will resume our current posture of strategic ambiguity.
Which is
and so I think it's important we have these debates honestly.
Yeah, so here's the thing about this. You know, again, what I like about Vivek is that, again, unlike most politicians, if you ask any politician this question, I guarantee you they're not giving you an answer. And I'm going to tell you why they're not going to give you an answer. They're not going to give you an answer because what Vivek is bringing up here is the fact that we don't have an actual position on China, right, in Taiwan. What happens if China actually invades Taiwan tomorrow? What happens? You got one or two options, right? Either Taiwan takes over China and basically controls the world supply of semiconductors, okay, which is a huge thing because semiconductors are basically in almost every electronic device. Okay, almost every device has a semiconductor in it. It's a very, very, very important resource, strategic resource. You let China have control of that, something that literally could cripple our nation if they decide for whatever reason, hey, we're not going to give semiconductors to the United States anymore. It's either that or war, right? Both of those things are positions where it's like a lose-lose. Our government officially can't even really take a position. These politicians are not going to take a position. But Vivek is the only politician that will actually take a position, whether you agree with it or not. He's telling you, well, hey, look, let's at the very least get ourselves out of a position where we're reliant on Taiwan for their number one resource, right? A resource that you could argue probably worth protecting more so than whatever we're trying to protect in Ukraine, right? The semiconductor supply and manufacture in Taiwan. Hey, let's try to get our way out of this by having our own semiconductor manufacturing. And then in 2028, then we can resume a position of being ambiguous. But we do know, at least at that point, if China decides to invade Taiwan, hey, we're not relying on Taiwan. AKA, we won't be relying on China when it comes to semiconductors. That's the last thing we want. But again, here's a foreign policy rookie. He don't know anything. But these same people that are saying this don't have a policy, right? They don't have one. And if you ask them, they're not going to give you a straight answer because there's a no win when it comes to this Taiwan situation. There's no win. He's presenting something, in my opinion, is the most reasonable thing rather than continuing to stay ambiguous about it. So again, this is the type of stuff I'm talking about, bro. You can't summarize somebody's policy in a couple of sound bites and get to the heart of what he's saying and why he's saying it. And again, this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 2028
That's correct, which is exactly what it is today, which is exactly what it is today. It's a notional commitment to strategic ambiguity.
Let me play what Nikki Haley said about your position on Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan.
Yeah, it's a lie. Go ahead and play it. Yeah.
We do need friends. We do need allies. We should never stop doing that. And his idea of breaking the partnership with Israel's the first line of defense for Iran. We have a partnership with Israel because they're the front line of defense to Islamic terrorism. We have a front line of defense with Ukraine because they are keeping Putin from doing what he said, which is the next stop is Poland and the Baltics, and that's a world war. That is what we're trying to prevent.
So did it sound like Vivek said any of those things that she just said about Israel? That clip that I just showed you guys before this, does it sound like Vivek said that he's going to break our partnership with Israel? That's not what he said at all. He actually said the exact opposite. He said we're going to strengthen it to the point where they can stand on their own 2 feet, which I kind of agree with. Okay, they should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Okay, no country should be surviving off the U.S. government teat, right? That dependent on us. I'm just saying. But yeah, I mean, again, this is just, it's a blatant lie. And see what the media does, because for whatever reason, you can't question this policy when it comes to Israel. I really don't know why, but they're not going to correct the lie, right? They're going to basically be adversarial towards Vivek, even though it is clear that he's being lied on in regards to his actual position on this.
Would you respond to her?
Yeah, with due respect, my concern is that our steps and NATO's steps right now are marching us closer to world war by driving Russia further into China's hands at a time when we have no visibility into what Russia's red lines are, and further at a moment when Russia has a larger nuclear stockpile and super EMP capabilities and hypersonic missile capabilities ahead of that of the U.S. And so what I've said is I would end that war, but on terms that end the Russia-China partnership. That is also how we deter Xi Jinping from going after Taiwan. Because right now, Xi Jinping's bet is that the U.S. will not want to go for two different allied nuclear superpowers at the same time. But if Russia is no longer in China's camp, then Xi Jinping is going to have to think twice before going after Taiwan. And I will repeat, I'm the only presidential candidate who has affirmatively said we will defend Taiwan because we have greater national interests there than we do in Ukraine. And I do not think that this war advances American interests. We should focus on the real enemy, that is communist China. And that's how I orient my foreign policy.
See, here's the problem, right? Here's the problem with this. It's not Vivek's fault. But it is much more understandable to the average person to say, Putin bad, right? We have to send more money to Ukraine because Putin bad, right? Putin evil. Okay, it's much easier to say that and to get people on board with something like that than to say, hey, look, guys, let's think about this strategically because what we're doing may actually drive us into a nuclear war. Okay, Russia's not really the real enemy in regards to their ability to really, affect us the same way that China can in regards to being able to cripple our economy and our nation because we get everything from them. Let's actually just try to end this war in Ukraine on terms that really, the two regions that he's talking about, Russia basically already has control over those regions, right? He said, look, let's already just give them what they have, okay? And in exchange for disconnecting them militarily from China. Now, again, can he actually do that? I think it is questionable whether or not he actually do that and what that type of negotiation would look like. But again, that, in my opinion, at least articulate some plan to get to an end of the war rather than, well, let's just keep sending money until, I don't know, something happens, right? Nukes, right? Until nukes start to get bought out. Let's just keep sending money. Let's just keep doing it because, Putin's about to lose, right? Russia's about to collapse. I think this is what they tell us, right? This is the type of stuff they tell us. Well, we got to keep any day now, right? But again, the problem with it is that it's too nuanced for the average person to understand versus what the mainstream liberal media puts out there as the simplest thing, which is, again, Putin bad, send more money to Ukraine. When you talk about trying to separate and realign strategic military alliances, that's a whole different ball game. That's on a whole different level of foreign policy. And it's just so funny how these people want to come out and say, you have no foreign politics experience. And it shows it's like, no. You don't understand. There's no doubt in my mind. This guy has studied this stuff more than you have, right? He studied it more than you have. He has a plan. He at least has some semblance of an idea on how to bring peace and how we need to direct our priorities, which is what's in America's best interest, right? But that's not how the rest of these politicians think. That's not how they think. And it's just funny because these are the same people that botched Vietnam, they botched Afghanistan, they botched Iraq, they botched Syria, right? They botched everything that we've touched from a foreign war perspective, but yet they want to tell you, oh yeah, well, we know what's best, right? We know what's best. Listen to us. It's like, bro, your track record is terrible. Your track record is terrible. So again, it's just amazing all the smears that come out against this man. And like I tried to tell you guys, if you have any questions about what this man actually believes and whether or not he's contradicting himself or he's flip-flopping, listen to the long form, okay? Listen to his actual conversation that he has, and you will see that more often than not, probably 95% of the time, he's not actually flip-flopping on anything. He's just being taken out of context or just flat out lied on, right? Which is what Nikki Haley did. She lied. Okay, and the mainstream media is pretending that she told the truth, right? And pressing this man on aid to Israel when they should be pressing Nikki Haley on the fact that she lied. So, hey, it is what it is. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.